Over 2,000 years ago, two disillusioned disciples walked along a dusty road to Emmaus. They had just witnessed Jesus, their friend and leader, whom they hoped to be the Messiah, suffer a gruesome death by crucifixion. Doubt, fear, and uncertainty clouded their conversation as they journeyed home, questioning the future. Until something miraculous happened. The risen Jesus appeared and answered their questions. Today, many young Catholics step onto college campuses with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed of faith given to them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, scheduled to be released in the summer of 2021, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. To pre-order your copy and help spread the word about the book, visit patchworkheart.org. Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you, and happy Holy Week to each and every one of you. Tonight begins the Triduum, so thank you so very much for joining us here on Holy Thursday evening. And as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-host Ann DeSantis, and we're going to have an awesome conversation tonight, Ann. So thank you so much for being here as always.
Yeah, great to be here, Bill. And I was particularly excited about this episode because we have an amazing guest, and I'm going to read her bio. Heidi Fishman grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut. After graduating from Williams College, she received both an MA and an EDD in counseling psychology from Western Michigan University. As a psychologist at Dartmouth College, she specialized in working with people with eating disorders and histories of trauma. While Heidi always knew her mother and grandparents were Holocaust survivors, she didn't start researching their story until she retired. 5 years of investigation led to Tutti's Promise, 2017 MB Publishing, Bethesda, which, while fictionalized for the purpose of allowing conversations among characters, follows the Lichtenstein's true story from May 10, 1940 in Amsterdam through 2 Nazi camps, liberation and resettlement. The book contains a significant number of original documents. Heidi Fishman won the Joseph Zola Memorial Holocaust Educator Award from the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. Tutti's Promise was designated by the National Council for the Social Studies and the Children's Book Council as a notable trade book for young people and has won numerous other awards. Heidi speaks to schools and community groups in order to teach about the perils of prejudice and bigotry. She's made multiple visits to USHMM in Washington, D.C. to sign copies of Tutti's Promise. Pre-COVID, she traveled to schools throughout the United States. In this time of COVID, she presents to schools remotely. She lives in Vermont with her husband and her aging border terrier. When she isn't staying home due to COVID safety measures, she likes to travel and discover new places and meet new people. And I think this is the perfect place, although we're online, to meet new people because it's a whole other audience here for you. Thank you so much for joining us, Heidi.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here this evening.
You have a beautiful bio. And thanks for sharing it because you've done so much, and how you were led to get involved with Tutti's Promise is just also incredible. And
yeah, I mean, it's just been it's been a ride, put it that way. So I never thought I was going to write a book. That was never anything in my upbringing of where I thought I would go. When I was in school, middle school, when I was supposed to be studying history, all I wanted was science and math. I steered away from words. I was a numbers girl. In college, I avoided writing classes, didn't want to do them. And then in 2012, my mother came to my daughter's 7th grade class to tell the students about what she experienced during the Holocaust. And during that talk is when I decided a book had to be written. This was not just a story for our family. This needed a wider audience. It needed to be preserved. It was important. The kids were really resonating with things my mother was saying. And then my first thought was, okay, I have to find an author who can write the book. And the more I thought about it, I had to write the book because I was the one who could capture my grandparents' voices, who have since passed. I could capture my mother's voice, and I could really push my mom to tell the whole story, not just what she thought was appropriate for the kids, but like dig deeper. So yeah. I went back, I had a doctoral degree, but I went back to school taking any workshop class I could find, a community college class on how to write. And I ended up with a book that got published. So,
oh, praise God.
Wow. Wow. Just incredible. Thank you so much for doing that because, the Holocaust, I think, while it is an incredibly difficult topic to talk about, it is something that is so very important for us today to understand as it kind of even mentioned in your bio, talking about bigotry and overcoming that and not, succumbing to that. We're seeing so much of that in our culture right now. We're seeing it's so relevant. So I would love to just maybe for you to touch on the importance of preserving it, as you kind of alluded to, touch on the importance of preserving it and what were some of the elements that were so worthy of being preserved for you?
Well, one thing about my mother's family during that time, it's an incredibly unusual story. They were in 2 different concentration camps for a total of about 18 months. But my mother survived. She was just before her 10th birthday when they were liberated. And her younger brother was with her. Her parents were with her. And her father's parents, so one set of grandparents were with her. 3 generations survived together in one camp, which is pretty unheard of. Most survivors made it out. They were the only ones of their family who made it out, or one distant cousin made it out, or they knew where one brother was, or something to that effect. But this was 3 generations that survived all together. Of course, the whole family did not survive. As far as my grandmother's parents were on the last train from the camp they were at to Auschwitz and were gassed. My mother had a dear uncle who died early in the war, also in Auschwitz. And then there's lots of the more distant relatives who did not make it. But the fact that they were able to stay together gave them so much hope. If you know where your mother is, if you know where your children are, if you can hug them at the end of the day, it makes a huge difference in your energy and survival, because hope just, comes from the heart, and it helps in every way. So I guess the story was just so important because I wanted kids to realize that even in the worst circumstances, there's something to hang on to. And also in the worst circumstances, they can be a hero. I mean, sometimes you're the victim of the situation, but sometimes you can step in and be the hero. And it doesn't have to be in a huge way. It might be doing something that seems small, but it makes a huge difference in somebody else's life. So those are some of the messages that are in there, and I just had to put them on paper.
Wow, that's incredible. I love even the cover of the book itself. It is interesting, and it's a picture of her and also a map, and it says a novel based on a family's true story of courage and hope during the Holocaust. So, and then the picture, is that her then when she was at that age, around that age?
That's my mom from 1944.
Okay.
Wow. So, and I have inside the book, there's more pictures. On my website, there's even more family pictures. My website, just if I can say it out here.
Please do.
It's called Papia and Me, Popje, Papia and Me. Papia is the name of my mother's doll. So that's where I came up with that. And there's all these family photographs. And there's these documents, actual Nazi documents about things that they were going on. And, when I was looking at the book, I'm going to write this, and I go into my parents' house and I'm like, Mom, what do we have? Is there anything? And, she points me to the one drawer in the back of the closet, and I start pulling things out, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a treasure trove in here. The things that my grandmother hung on to. The picture on this book was obviously a portrait studio, an actual photographer. My grandmother had the forethought to bring the children to photographers every year and have a picture taken of them. And then she was able to keep them. She couldn't have kept them on her own person if she was in a concentration camp. She gave them to friends who held on to them during the war and gave them back afterwards.
Wow.
So we have a lot of this preserved because of the righteous Gentiles, the people who helped by another way, by keeping their things and giving them back at the end of the war. So
I have to mention, if I could, because the beginning of the podcast would be great for people to know your website right now in case they say, you know what, I know enough. I want to get that book. And you go to heidifishman.com. I want to mention that this book is the recipient of a Gold Moonbeam Children's Book Award, named a notable social studies trade book for young people, winner of 2 silver Benjamin Franklin Awards, plus a silver Nautilus Award winner. So there's so much there. And what was the process like for you? Because obviously when you made this decision to write the book, and you like you said, you even became educated on writing. So how long did the process take, and what was it like for you on a personal level?
Well, it was 5 years from the time I said I want to write a book till it was published. And I have to admit, when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I'm just going to take all Mom's stories that she tells and I'll string them together and it'll be a book. And I started that and I said, this is a terrible book. This is not going to work this way. And I just kept my eye open for any writing workshop, there was some community college classes I took, and I just kept working it. I didn't really know what it was going to look like. I didn't know where I was going, but I just kept working, trying to put the stories together, and it just started to have a life of its own. I think books do that sometimes, that there's only one place you can go from this place to that place. It just leads you there. Of course, it wasn't like writing a novel, because I wasn't making up the story. The story was real. but I would keep uncovering more details that, my mother was only 10 at the end of the war. So she didn't know everything that happened. I couldn't ask my grandparents anymore. And I learned a lot about researching. I started online, lying on the couch in the living room and just Googling things, my grandfather's name and just various things. And the first thing I found, which was new to me, was I found in the Yad Vashem archives. Yad Vashem is the equivalent of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum that's in Jerusalem. It's Israel's Holocaust Museum. And I was looking around in their archives online, and I found a document that was used at the Eichmann trial as evidence against Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the top Nazis in charge of the final solution. It was evidence against him with my grandfather's name on the paper. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? I immediately call my mother. What's this about? And she's like, I have no idea. I don't know what that is. And what I uncovered was like this whole backstory of part of their survival that my mother had no idea about.
Wow.
So, then I'm hooked. Like, what else am I going to find?
Yeah.
And it just kept going from there. I started a blog just about my adventures and learning how to write and learning in the research and what I was uncovering. And I did that because somebody said you have to have an online presence if you want to find a publisher. They're not going to, nobody's going to publish a book if they've never seen anything else you've written. So I'm writing a blog and I'm writing a book. So, I got two jobs, right? And another piece of the puzzle on how my mother survived was that they had a fake Paraguay. Well, it was a real Paraguayan passport, but the fake part was that they weren't actually Paraguayan. So they had this document saying they were Paraguayan citizens instead of that they were stateless refugees from Germany who had fled to the Netherlands. And because they had a Paraguayan passport, the Nazis treated them slightly better than the average Jew. Mm. So, Mom, where did the passport come from? She doesn't know. She just knew that the family had it. So I blogged about the passport. And 2 weeks later, I get an email. My grandfather helped your grandfather get that passport. And I'm like, really? Well, who are you? Tell me what you know. And I kept coming like this, the universe aligned and things kept coming to me. You put it out there that you're looking for something and then the information comes. It was just amazing. And then I went all over Europe too. I went to Amsterdam. I went to every location in the book I went to.
Wow.
What was that experience like?
It was, it was everything from just really fun to say, oh, this is the street my mom lived on when she was 4 years old. And, just sort of to pull in that atmosphere, to devastating. I spent a day at Theresienstadt, which is now called Terezin. It's a town in Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, which was the camp that they spent the last part of the war at. And that was the most depressing day I think I've ever had, because it was a town that was turned into a concentration camp that is now a struggling town again. And I was sitting at a restaurant having lunch in this town, and I knew the building I was in had been a barracks where people had starved to death during the war. And it's like, how do you wrap your head around that?
You don't. Yeah.
It's like, it just doesn't compute. Mm-mm. But there I am having lunch. My great grandfather was in that, could have been in that same building starving. It's just, how do you put that together? Yeah. There was ups and downs and all kinds of emotions going on.
That's so, wow. Wow.
I can see you both are like speechless. You don't know
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
to
we're
say.
speechless.
Yeah.
We're speechless because I'm imagining it, and I give you a lot of credit, and boy, how God enlightened you to even do this project because it needed to be done, and you were the right person.
I don't think really, maybe my brother could have done it, but basically it had to be somebody close to my mom and somebody who knew my grandparents. You, the decisions that my grandparents made along the way, there's all kinds of decisions they had to make. And having known, my grandmother died when I had just graduated from college, and my grandfather, about 5 years after that. So I knew them well. I had grown up knowing their personalities. And so I could, as a psychologist too, sort of try to channel them, so to speak. What would my grandfather say here? What would my grandmother do there? And I felt like I really captured them for real in the book. And that's actually something my mother said when I finally finished the manuscript and she read it for the first time. She said, "You brought them back."
I love the graphic that you sent me. If I could just read this, because there's a picture of the wedding, and then it says, "A promise kept is like the twinkling stars in the night sky, a constant reminder of something important that makes you who you are. Can 9-year-old Tutti keep a promise and a secret? Her family's life may depend on it." Talk more about that, because first of all, that's a beautiful picture. And I don't want to give the story away for those who are going to purchase the book and buy it and read it. But can you talk a little bit about that promise?
I can. So before I get to the promise, let me just tell you a little bit about the picture, because
Okay.
You're alluding to it. So this is my grandparents' wedding picture. And my grandparents are sitting there in the middle, completely happy, and my grandfather's handsome. Everybody called him, he could have been a movie star. My grandmother's just glowing. And then the families all around them, their parents, their siblings, there's aunts, uncles, cousins. You can tell they're in a kind of posh place of some sort. I don't know where exactly it was, but it looks like, 1932. It's a European hotel setting, and everybody's just extremely happy. That's before all the problems started, 1932. So the promise. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that document I found about the Eichmann trial, because this is where it fits together. My grandfather was a metals commodities dealer. So he bought and sold metal internationally. And during the war, obviously the Nazis needed metal. If you're going to fight a war, you need to build your submarines and your airplanes and your bullets, and you need metal for that. So my grandfather, basically they let him keep working because he could make arrangements for metal. And then in 1943, the final solution was becoming, into reality. And there's an argument between Adolf Eichmann, who wants all the Jews out of the Netherlands and Western Europe and everywhere, and then he's shuttling them to the death camps. And then there's another top Nazi named Albert Speer, and Speer was in charge of armaments and munitions and needed metal. They're sending documents back and forth to each other, fighting over what to do with what they called metal Jews. And it was different documents. Some have 3 names, some have 7 names, some have 12 names. They all have my grandfather's name as the first name on the list. He was the metal Jew. And it was, what do we do with these guys? Speer saying, keep them in the Netherlands, they're helping us. And help, I'm going to put in quotes, I'll explain that a little bit later. Eichmann saying, no, get rid of them. They have to go east. They have to go to the camps. And so what happened was my grandfather ended up in Westerbork, which was the transit camp in Eastern Holland, where basically all the Dutch Jews were sent before they were sent to Poland. Well, what used to be Poland. It wasn't Poland anymore at that point. And my grandfather worked with some friends, and they were trying to turn Westerbork into a work camp. So if the Nazis thought you were useful, you didn't get killed right away. If you were useful, they kept you alive. And so they turned the camp into a scrap metal sorting facility. So an airplane is shot down, it's brought to the camp. We put the aluminum here, the steel there, the cables in another pile. We sort it all out so that the Nazis can use it. However, my grandfather's friend was in cahoots with the resistance, and the sorted metal was then basically, it was taken. The resistance would mix the pile back up again and then send it back to the camp to be resorted. So the Jews were being busy, but they weren't accomplishing a whole lot. And there was also metal that was sabotaged by, if you throw the copper in with the aluminum, it's not going to work the way aluminum is supposed to work. They were putting the wrong things in the wrong buckets on purpose too, so that the airplanes would fail and things to that effect. Okay, so I know this is a long backstory to get to my mother's
it's okay.
promise,
It's all right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
but otherwise it doesn't make sense. So because my grandfather was doing this, trying to keep people in the Netherlands, and it worked. There were 1,200 Jews working at the camp, not being sent east, which is amazing.
Yeah.
He was being sent to Amsterdam, to The Hague, to Rotterdam, to find the metal, to talk to the metal dealers, to talk to the scrap metal folks, and to make the arrangements to have the metal brought to the camp. So he's a prisoner in the camp. My mother's at the camp. My uncle's at the camp. My grandmother's at the camp. And my grandfather's going back and forth into town. But he always comes back because, of course, his family are held hostage. And on one of these trips into town and coming back, he bought a doll. He bought a brand new doll, and he gave it to my mother as her 9th birthday present when she was in the camp. But it didn't come without strings attached. He says, "This is yours, happy birthday. I have put our last bit of money inside it. That money we'll need one day. We'll need it to buy extra food, to bribe someone to stay alive. I don't know what, but it's the only place I can hide it. You are in charge of the doll and the money. Don't let anybody take it away from you." My mother still has that doll. Okay, so that's the promise. And there's another.
I want to cry. Oh my God.
There's another promise at the end of the book, which I will not reveal because that's the very end of the book. But this promise is in the middle of the book. But that was sort of the main promise, that my mother, as a 9-year-old, in a life and death situation, is put in charge of the family's only valuables. And, he said, never let anyone take the doll away. And when I'm writing the book, I had the doll right in front of me. She was my muse. There was Papia. There was my muse. Now, she's now in a museum in Connecticut at the University of Hartford, but she still belongs to my mother. She's just on loan. And the money is no longer inside her.
I just love it. And I hope that as many people who are listening get the book. I know it's on Amazon too.
It's on Amazon. It's also, it's a Kindle. It's an audio book. I really, really wanted an audio book because when I was a kid, I wasn't a reader. I was much more of a listener. And when I discovered audiobooks as an adult, I was like, oh, this is so great. So it's also an audiobook.
Well, you've spoken the words of my heart because I love Audible and it's one of my favorite things. So I don't have it yet on Audible, but I'm getting it.
Oh, great.
I'm excited about that.
And then it is written geared towards middle school age kids. And on my website, I have discussion questions to go with it so that whether it's a teacher or a homeschooling, either way, you can have that family discussion. You can read a few chapters together and then look at the questions that I raised and have that discussion. What's going on in that chapter? Why did so-and-so do this? Why did so-and-so do that?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I can't help but think, you said your mother's still alive, and God bless her too. I mean, and you were raised by someone who was so deeply affected by that in your own childhood, right? So I wondered if there's anything that you wanted to share with us also about your life, because obviously where you came from made an effect also on your own early life and even to this day.
My mother, she, yes, she had some trauma because of this, obviously. On the other hand, my grandmother, in my mind, is a true hero, because she completely sheltered her kids from the worst of it. My mother doesn't remember seeing anybody die. She doesn't remember death. Okay. She was in a camp where between 33 and 35,000 people died from starvation. She doesn't remember death. So my grandmother sheltered her.
Okay.
And the sheltering was, it was a way of, the attitude was always spoil the children, do everything you can for the children. If there's extra food, it's for the children. If there's extra anything positive, it's for the children. So how did this affect me? I was spoiled. My mother did everything she could to spoil my brothers and I. The best gifts, everything, anything we wanted, we got. So, it could have, I could have completely become a brat. I don't think I'm a complete brat, but the potential was definitely there. Anything they want, they get. So, they really just try to make the best life. My mother, all she wanted was to be an American housewife, happy-go-lucky, suburban, when she got to the United States in the 1950s, just sort of what that iconic image was. Whatever Doris Day was portraying in the movies that year, that's what she wanted. And she tried to just sort of pass that on to us. So,
yeah.
The other children of survivors talk about hearing about the trauma all the time, but that was not our experience. It wasn't, my mother didn't talk about what happened. My grandparents didn't talk about what happened. They would answer questions if we asked. If the question came up, what happened, how did you handle this? What happened with that? They would answer, and then the conversation would move on. And they answered in a way that made it sound like, it's not that interesting. So why are you asking any questions anyway? Just enough to quell my curiosity and then move on. So,
yeah, it sounds like that your grandparents didn't want that trauma to affect any of the future generations in any way at all. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yep.
And it makes sense that your mother wanted to give you the best, because she had experienced, and even though, like you said, she didn't really, your grandmother tried to protect her. So maybe she didn't have as much trauma as she could have had, right?
Right.
It could have been worse, but at the same time, she was given the doll and said, listen, this is our life savings. Hold on to this doll. And so, your mother was instilled in her, if you think about it, the idea of being that perfect caretaker. To me, it sounds like your mother was instilled in that so much. She, in the United States, wanted to be that perfect housewife, that perfect mother, right? Because she saw the other side of that, even though she might not have wanted to talk about it all too often. She wanted to go in a different way with her own kids and just kind of say, you know what, that was a bad time of my life, but the rest of my life is going to be much better.
Exactly.
Is that what it is? I mean,
we're moving forward. We don't dwell in the past. We move forward, which is why I think when I was in school, we had to study history. I was like, why are we bothering with studying history? Is it really important? My mom doesn't even want to talk about history. Why should I study history? So it was all about sort of a forward momentum, how to make, how to take care of the next generation.
Sure.
Now, I don't know how old your mother is, and you don't need to talk, disclose that, but has your mother been able to really be able to read and appreciate the book, or is she to a point now with getting older that it's...
Oh, she totally appreciates the book.
Oh,
yes.
does she? Oh, good.
And actually we still speak at schools together.
Oh my
So
gosh, your mother.
she's in her mid 80s, and she goes to school. Well, before the pandemic, she would go to schools and tell the story, and the kids would always be, amazed. They're meeting a survivor. How many students now get to meet a survivor?
Oh, your mom is incredible.
And now it's getting, it's definitely gotten harder for her. In the last year, I'd say, before the pandemic, we would do some of the appearances together. And it'd be more like I was telling the story, and then I'd say, okay, Mom, tell the story now about the doll. Tell the story about your birthday. Tell the story, about the attic, whatever. We'd pick different spots that she would tell and different ones that I would tell. And then this whole thing now with the pandemic, she doesn't do Zoom very well.
Okay.
That's the technology.
She's amazing.
The technology is definitely hard. But we have done a couple of joint Zoom appearances at schools when I knew I was not positive and I could go visit her and spend some time in my parents' house.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. If you don't mind, I'd love to turn the conversation over. I know you and I had talked on the phone. As you know, this podcast is Sowing Hope. We are a Catholic podcast. However, our audience really is all over the place, right, Bill? I mean, we have so many different people who listen to this podcast. And you had mentioned the fact that you yourself are Jewish and that you found out in your doing the research, right? Something about the Jewish religion itself and the history there, and how some of those relatives or people that were associated were actually pretty involved in religion. Whether they were rabbis, I'm not sure, but I would love to hear.
Okay, so I was not was not brought up in a religious household. We were what you call high holiday Jews. Sort of like the Catholics who go to Mass on Christmas and Easter. We went Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and that was it. I was actually, I only went to Sunday school till 4th grade, and then my dad was like, "We're just going skiing," So I kind of got pulled out of Sunday school because I went skiing instead. And it was never really, religion was not part of my mother's life growing up either. She knew she was Jewish, but it wasn't like they did Shabbat dinners or those kind of things in the house. So I'm doing research and I'm looking into, my grandparents, and I find out that my grandfather's mother, okay, so I don't know how to put that in maternal and paternal, but my grandfather's mother is the daughter of a rabbi, okay? It turns out he's the head rabbi of this town in Poland. Okay, so who's his father? He's the head rabbi of another town in Poland. Who's his father? Another head rabbi of whatever town. And I can go back to the 16th century where my 14th great grandfather's brother is the one who wrote something called the Shulchan Aruch, which is it lays out all the Judaic laws. So I'm from a completely Orthodox religious family, but it was lost in the generation just before the Holocaust and through the Holocaust. And now, just to finish that circle, my son has discovered his Judaism. He is Hasidic. He's been living in Crown Heights. He goes to a yeshiva. He can't really eat at my home anymore. I have to go to where he is to eat because he is that kosher. I can't find the kosher food in the middle of Vermont.
Wow.
So it's come full circle.
It has. Oh, I know we talked a little bit about this on the phone, and being that this is Passover, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it would be the perfect time for us to discuss that because And Bill, you know this as well. There's, we as Catholics get our religion, basically. I mean, so much of it is from Judaism. I mean, obviously,
Jesus was Jewish.
Right. I was just going to say Jesus was Jewish.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. I mean, even the actual Mass itself, I've heard from Jewish friends of mine that, and just in reading about it, that there's so much, right, Bill?
Yes.
I mean, that come from the Jewish religion. It's just incredible.
Oh yeah.
But that's an amazing thing.
I mean, the first 5 books of the Bible are the Jewish Bible. It is the Torah. So Old Testament is, starts with Abraham and Isaac, and that's the Jewish story.
Yeah, and we have
with your son. So, sorry, Bill.
I'm just saying we have so much to learn, from our brothers and sisters who are of the Jewish faith, and we have so much to learn, I believe, too, from the Holocaust. Right? There is so much to learn from it, and I kind of alluded to that at the beginning of the program. But my question for you is, you go into all these different schools, and you're talking to these middle schoolers who now have iPhones, and they have these devices that can Google this stuff within half a second, right? I mean, we live in that culture. We're like, okay, I want to know what the Holocaust was. Boom, okay, click a button, and there it is on Google. But there's something that cannot be relayed. The experience that you have had in researching it, and also that your mother had living it, can't be Googled. And so I'm wondering if there's a certain lesson that you probably got, an hour or whatever talking to these kids and answering their questions or whatever as you're going in and doing this. But what are you trying to instill in them, about the anger, the bigotry, the hatred that's out there in our world today? Through not only through the book, but through interfacing with these young people.
What I really want them to learn is the empathy for other people. That if they can,
Amen.
If they can put themselves in the shoes of somebody else who's living a different type of life, and understand that person's challenges that are in front of them and the difficulties in their life, but also the fact that in the end they want the same thing that child themselves wants. You want to know your family is safe. You love your mother. You want to know that your house is standing when you come to it. You want to know that there's going to be a good meal on the table. These are normal things that everybody expects and they want. And if you then see a child who's told, oh, you're in charge of our life, the only money we have that might save our life, and you're 9 years old. And in the book, when kids are reading it, they get that. They stop and they're like, oh, what if I was in charge of the only money my parents have? Well, could I do that? And there's different scenes in the book. This book does not have the horror in it. It doesn't have Auschwitz in it. We have the fear of Auschwitz, but we don't go to Auschwitz in this book. So it is very age appropriate for the middle school kids. It's not so over the top that they turn off and they're like, I can't deal with this. This is too much. They feel the empathy. What would it be like if I'm in this situation and my brother's missing? What do I do? How would I feel? Yeah. And then, oh, my brother's back. Oh, okay. It's just these small moments that I put in the book that happened, but they get it. And I was able to put those small moments in the book because those are the ones that my mother remembered, because as a child, those are the ones that were most important to her. So,
thank you, Bill. That was a great question. I have to expand on this empathy because for me, personally, on my own life mission, I think we can learn reading, writing, math. We can learn how to be good communicators. But in my opinion, the very top of that list, and that would even go for religion. And I say this to Bill all the time. We talk about this part of this podcast is that being empathetic to all people, right? Every single human being. The word Catholic is supposed to be, and it means universal, right? So, I mean, we can't just be these people of rules and regulations. I mean, although, you know, in life there are rules and regulations, right? But I mean, that empathy, that's got to be at the top of that list, right,
It does.
Bill? I mean, that is the most important thing to me as a Catholic, and as a, you know, and as a person of goodwill, right? No matter what religion or non-religion we are, we got to be empathetic to people, to their suffering, to what they've been through. On a side note, I'll have a book coming out this year called Love and Care for the Marginalized. So I'm excited about that, and probably be published sometime this year. It's a book of 40 meditations. So
That sounds wonderful.
thank you. Thank you. I'm excited.
You know, I want these kids to know that they can make a difference in the world, in somebody's life.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a very small thing they do, or it could be huge.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a new kid at school, invite them in, get to know them,
Yeah,
introduce them to
exactly.
other people, help them form a friendship circle of you know, who they can hang out with.
Yeah.
Don't push them aside because they're new or different, or their family speaks a different language at home, or you know, the mother cooks different food than you know, that kid brings in different food that you don't bring into your lunchbox. Who cares? Try it. Trade.
Right. Oh no, I couldn't agree with you more. It's such an honor for us to host you on this podcast, and and for us, you know, we are celebrating Holy Week, and in the Jewish tradition, Passover, a perfect time to have you on this
Thank you.
on this podcast. Yes. I didn't know if you had any other things that are happening for you this coming year as well, because, you know, here we are supposedly, right? We're going to be coming out of this pandemic. It's going to be great when we finally are. And I wondered if you had any other plans or things that you wanted to let our audience know about.
Well, I get my vaccine tomorrow, so I'm
Okay.
so happy. But you know, go out there if you have a chance to get your own vaccine. Please get it. Science works. That's one message I have for people. I had all kinds of things coming up when the pandemic hit, and then it all got stopped. And right now, I really don't have those plans made for this coming year. It's been a little rough. You know, things have been on the book has sort of been on the back burner for me, because it's been, the focus has been on me taking care of other people this year. Trying to help my mother with her Instacart shopping, and my father's health has been failing. So there's been some, you know, trying to just be supportive from a distance and gunning down there when I can. I need to get out there more, you know, now, you know, that we're winding down, I need to start filling up my schedule with school talks. So the schedule's kind of open.
Yeah.
I am available. I do have a couple of other books in my brain that haven't come out onto paper yet that I would like to write, but this has not been the year for me to be able to focus on doing that. So there's a book, I would love to see a book written, and maybe I'm the one to do it, of short stories around these falsified documents that like this Paraguayan passport, and how they helped different families in different ways. And they basically, very quickly, those passports came out of a group of Polish diplomats in Switzerland who were not Jewish. So we have Polish Catholic diplomats in Switzerland who were working with Jewish leaders in Switzerland, and they were creating these fake passports and sending them all over Europe to save people.
Oh my goodness. And
it's an unknown story. And I want to just capture those moments where the passports helped someone in a certain way, because I'm not going to give it away, but it significantly helped my mother's family.
We'll have to keep an eye on your website then. It's khheidifishman.com.
I would love it if I could do that in the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, first of all, you're doing incredible work, and I just want people to realize that, you know, you're doing amazing work. And, you know, first of all, anytime we are now in 2021, folks, it is really hard to talk to Holocaust survivors and those people who interface with them. It is really hard. I know I've talked to several in my life, and we've had different opportunities. When I was in grade school, which was, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was in grade school, we had different opportunities to talk with them. But the reality is today, for young people today, to have opportunities to encounter Holocaust survivors and their memories, and to keep the memories alive like Heidi has done, for this next generation, because it's so important. I think for young people to do those small little things that can make a difference. One of the things you said that stuck with me is, that children can make a difference in their lives. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing. But the amazing thing is, I just think about that doll that you're talking about, and that had to be one of the most significant moments of your mother's life, to take care of that doll. I mean, clearly it's a centerpiece of the story for you, but it's also a reminder for everyone else that small little acts have big effects and big ripples, and so. Maybe just touch on the lastly, as we wind down here, just the environment that we're living in, and instilling in young people, and really all people, how to interface with others, how to overcome the bigotry and hatred that we see out there today, because there's so much of it. We've seen this rise up during the pandemic in different ways, and I would just love to, hear your perspective on how we as a society can overcome that.
Well, part of it is to get out of our own little bubbles. A lot of social media is what people are relying on right now. And when you're on social media, you depend on the people that are most like you to give you what they're seeing in the world. And you see less of what people that are different than you might be seeing. So it's to get out of your bubble and talk to people who are different than you. Talk to people who come from a different perspective. Learn from them. You don't always have to agree with everything they say, but be willing to have that conversation where you learn something new. Say, oh, it never occurred to me to look at that way. That's interesting. I wonder how much of that I want to take in on my own, or versus how much of that I want to, no, that doesn't quite jive for me. And you can do that in a very polite way. I think we've lost that, the fine art of conversation and debate. People don't do that anymore.
Yeah. They just like, oh, I don't agree. Turn it off. And we have to stop doing that.
Yeah. And then also realize that when I say somebody who's different, the different part of them is very small compared to the same part of them. So you're Catholic and I'm Jewish. Okay. So on Sunday or Friday or Saturday, whatever, we kind of maybe, pray in a different way. Mm-hmm. But hey, what's the same? We're both interested in empathy and people getting along with each other and taking care of the marginalized other person who doesn't have an opportunity in life. We have so much more the same than we have different. Mm-hmm. And too often people see that little bit that's different, the 1% that's different, and they forget the 99% that's the same.
Mm. Yeah. Well said. Thank you. It's great. It's wonderful not only to have you on this podcast, but to make a new friend, right? I mean, it's, and like you said, I mean, what separates people is a lot smaller than we realize, because really the most important thing is love in this world, and all of us can love, right? And isn't that an amazing thing? Yes.
We do love, everybody loves somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Amen.
Well, Heidi, thank you so very much. Please give us the websites and everything again, so that people can go and get the book.
Okay, so the book is named Tutti's Promise, TUTTI' Promise. It is available, Amazon or your local bookstore. You can ask them to order it. Audible. Kindle. My website is Papia and Me, POPJE and me.com. Or if you go to HeidiFishman.com or Tutti'sPromise.com, it'll redirect you right to it. So if that's easier to remember. And right now, I am giving away free ebooks to teachers. My publishers agreed for 50 books to be given to teachers. If they just go onto my website, find the little link that says free book, and you can sign up for a free ebook. And I'm trying to get it more into the classrooms. There's some schools that are using it on a regular basis, but it'd be nice to hit a few more schools. And again, if you get the book and you read it, go to the website to get the add-ons. There's videos of my mom telling parts of the story. There's more pictures. There's more documents. There's questions. So there's a lot of information there. And my whole blog, the whole How Did I Write the Book blog is on there too.
Wonderful. Can I just make a shout out to anyone who's listening? If you're an educator, whether you work in the public school system, private school, or the Catholic schools as well, please do contact Heidi. I mean, this is the perfect book for your school district. It really is. So I just can't say that enough, that anyone's listening who is an educator, you want to get your hands on it and you want to present this to your school district. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, well, folks, thank you for joining us on this Holy Thursday, on this Passover episode of Sowing Hope. We really do appreciate you tuning in and being a part of our show. But until next time, from all of us here at Patchwork Heart Ministry, keep sowing hope into broken hearts and beating to your Catholic heart. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2.